Before we start the lesson, welcome guys. Please pause the video, try this warm-up factorizing question by yourselves and come back to check the solutions. So remember where we left off last time. We said that if we've got a positive last term in our trinomial, to factorize it, we have to take into account that we would have two negatives or two positives that were multiplied to give that last term that is positive. Okay, that is why I am indicating here for you there's a positive last term and a negative middle term. So we look at if it's positive last term, we look at the negative or the positive middle term, and that determines whether it's going to be two negatives in our brackets or two positives in our brackets. So the warm-up done here. Remember we had steps that we had to follow. So step 1 was you multiply first and last term. So that would be x squared multiplied by 3, which gives you 3x squared. And that's what's going into our table. And it's quite simple because 3 is a prime number. So 3 and 1 are the factors that we would have available. So we're looking for 3x squared factors, and that would only be, and as we mentioned, the middle term is negative, so in our brackets we're going to have negatives. So it's going to be negative times a negative gives you the positive that we want there. But remember when we add it, we get a negative and a negative added together gives you a negative still. That's why we want this. So that gives you 3x times 1x. And then the sum gives us, if we sum them, negative 3x and negative 1x leaves you with negative 4x. And that is indeed my middle term, negative 4x, that I am looking for. Okay, so like we mentioned, highlight the factors that you're going to be working with. So step number 3 would be, sorry, I'm doing that all the time. This was step number 2 till 4, and then this is step number 5. Okay, so in step number 5, we have to write the first term that we had in our trinomial, then the factors that we highlighted, which was negative 3x and negative 1x, and then the last term of our trinomial, which was positive 3. Okay, now we have to factorize it by group. Well, we first have to group it, but we factorize it when we make groups. We're creating common brackets in that sense. So I'm going to group together these two as always, and then these two as always. So in my first group, I have x as a common factor. So I can take out a common factor of x and then divide each of the terms in that group by the common factor x. So remaining in the first term of my group would be x squared divided by x gives me x, and then negative 3x divided by x, the x's basically eliminate one another and just negative 3 remains. Then in my second group, my yellow group, I have a common factor of negative 1. Just a reminder that if my first term is negative in the group that I want to factorize, I have to take out a common factor that is negative. So it's going to be negative 1 because both 1 and 3 can divide by 1. And so remaining, if I divide each term by negative 1, is for the first term in the group positive 1x, and then for the second term in the group 3 divided by negative 1 gives you negative 3. And that then gives us identical brackets in each term that I've created. So what is the next step? Do you remember? We're just simply going to divide by the common bracket. So we take out our common bracket as a common factor basically, and then we write the remaining value from each of these terms. So we're dividing by the common bracket x minus 3 in each term, and then remaining from the first term would be the x, and the second term would be the negative 1. So x and negative 1 are the remaining values, and that is the fully factorized form. Okay, and there you go. That is the fully factorized. So today we're moving along onto the factors of trinomials where the last term is negative. Okay, we've just been working with positive last terms. So if the operator of the last term is negative, the factors of the last term in the FOIL brackets will have to be a positive and a negative, because a positive times a negative will give you the negative last term. Okay, but now we have to determine with which factor does the positive go and with which factor does the negative value go. Okay, so that is the only thing. But we have devised a plan, and that is that you look at the middle term sign once again. So if the middle term is negative, your biggest factor must be negative, and if your middle term is positive, the biggest factor must be positive. Okay, so let's have a look here. We still follow the same steps. We're just working with negative last term. And step number 1 was you multiply the first term with the last term. X squared times negative 5 leaves you with negative 5x squared. Then number 2, 2, 4, this time I'm going to remember, is the table. And just like in the previous example, we're looking for factors of a number that is a prime number. And therefore, it only has the factors 5 and 1. So we have negative 5x squared that we're working with this time. And to give negative, we have to say a positive times a negative. And then we know that the factors would be 5 and 1. But let's go back to what we said here. If the sign of the middle term is negative, which it is, the biggest factor must be negative. So between 5 and 1, the two factors that we're going to put into the table here, which one's the biggest number if we think about it without signs? Just 5 and 1. And that would be 5. So the 5 is to go with the negative so as to give the biggest negative answer. Okay, so it's 1x and negative 5x. And then we have to sum them. Let's see if it gives you the middle term's value. And then if I say 1x minus 5x or negative 5x plus 1x, and that indeed does give you negative 4x. And so that's my negative 4x that I was looking for. So that is the factors that I'll be working with. And then in step 5, we have to then write the first term again, break it up with the two factors that I've just identified for the middle term, so 1x and negative 5x. Then for the last term, we just rewrite negative 5. And now we group them, and we have got the first group here and the second group. Okay, and we're going to identify like terms from each group. So in my first group, keep doing that. So in my first group, the pink group or red group, x squared plus 1x, I have a common factor of x. So I divide each term there by the common factor x, and I write x, and then the remainder goes into the brackets. X squared divided by x for the first term in that group is just x, and then plus 1x divided by x is 1 because x divided by x is 1 anyway. Right, I've factorized my first group. Then for my second group, I have a negative first term, so negative, and then there's a 5 in each of my terms. So it's negative 5. That is the common factor. So I go and divide each term by negative 5. And so for the first term in that group, negative 5x divided by negative 5, just x remains. And then for the second term, it's negative 5 divided by negative 5, which means positive 1 is the answer to that calculation and is the remainder for the second term from my group. And lastly, we have now created identical brackets. So we divide by those identical brackets as a common factor basically. So we divide by x plus 1 in each term. Okay, and we say our common bracket or common factor is a set of brackets is x plus 1. Now in the second set of brackets I write the remaining values from each of those terms. So x plus 1 divided by x plus 1 in each term would become 1. And remaining in my first term I have x, and in my second term I have negative 5. So x minus 5 will be the remaining values that go into my remainder brackets. And there you have it. You have factorized an expression or trinomial where the last term is negative. On to example number 2, your turn. Please try this on your own. So pause, do it, come back for the solution. So now the first term times the last term is x squared times negative 6, which gives you negative 6x squared. Then for step number 2, we have to insert a table. And as mentioned, we're looking for the factors of negative 6x squared. So we know the factors of 6 would be 2 and 3 and 6 and 1. And we know it's to get x squared, we multiply x with x each time, respectively. So now we need to just place our negative and our positive term, because a negative times a positive would give you this negative answer here. And so we say, okay, so my middle term is positive. Remember where we look at that. And then you say, therefore my positive answer has got to be the biggest number. So between 3 and 2, my 3 would be the biggest number. So it's positive 3 and negative 2. Then I place a positive and a negative for the next pair of factors. 6 and 1, the biggest number is 6, so that has to be positive, and negative 1x then. Now let's see which pair of factors gives us the correct answer. So the sum is how we've determined that. Negative 2x plus 3x gives you positive 1x. Not the answer I'm looking for. But 6x minus 1x for the next pair of factors gives you positive 5x. And that is then my pair of factors that I will be working with, positive 6x and negative 1x. So number 5, okay, is then first term, the two factors, positive 6x and negative 1x, and the last term of negative 6. We group them, so we have x squared and positive 6x as one group, negative 1x and negative 6 as the other group. Then in number 6, we're going to take out a common factor. We're going to group them by, we're taking out a common factor out of each group. So in my red circled group, I have common factor of x. In other words, I go divide each term by x. And then the remainder goes into the brackets when I calculate that. So x squared divided by x is x, 1x. And then 6x divided by x is 6, positive 6. Then, once again, my first term is negative in my next group. Therefore, negative 1 is the common factor because 1 and 6 can both divide by 1 at least. So I take out my common factor, negative 1, and I then divide by negative 1 in each term. And so, remaining in the first term, negative 1x divided by negative 1 gives you just x remaining. And then negative 6 divided by negative 1 is positive 6 remaining. Right, so we've created identical brackets. We are therefore in the next step going to take out the common brackets as a common factor, and that would give you the fully factorized form. Okay, so they eliminate when they divide by the same set of brackets. Only thing remaining is 1. So x plus 6 is my common bracket. So you write your common factor or your common bracket, and then you open another set of brackets which will contain the remaining values in each term. So x and negative 1. So x and negative 1. There we go.
All right, so in this example, you may, it may seem like you've done this before, no biggie, okay? But something is different than all the others that we've done, because we do notice all of the terms are positive. Positive last term, positive middle term is what I wrote here. But that will help you when we're at the stage where we are going to factorize the actual trinomial. But if you were in one of my live lessons last week, you would know that I told you you have type 1 as the common factor because it's number 1. You first check whether you have any common factors throughout the whole expression. So this is just a little something different. We have a common factor of 2. Each one of these terms can actually divide by the factor of 2 without leaving a remainder. So that's my first thing I have to do. Take out the 2 as a common factor, then remaining I will have for the first term x squared, then plus 6 divided by 2 is positive 3x, and the last term 4 divided by 2 is positive 2. And this is my trinomial that I actually have to now factorize. So I then follow the steps of the trinomial factorization, okay, and I'm going to do it here on the right hand side. So the step number 1 is multiply first and last term. X squared times 2 is 2x squared. Step number 2 is that you have to write the table. So since this is a prime number, the only factors will be 2 and 1. Okay, so the factors of 2x squared is 2x times 2x. Let's just make sure what the value of our middle term is. Is it positive or negative? It's positive. So therefore, I have to keep it as positive 2x and positive 2x. 1x. What am I doing there? Okay, so let's just erase that part. The positive 1. Made a silly error there. Okay, so now we have to sum it, and then that is positive 3x, which is exactly what the middle term is equal to now. So therefore now we're going to say that it is x squared. It's not step number 3. I'm doing this the whole time. Step number 5. Okay, so x squared, and then that's from the trinomial over here that we're writing, what's in the brackets over here. Then the 2 factors that I'm going to quickly highlight for you. Okay, so 2x and 1x, positive 2x and positive 1x. And then the last term from the trinomial in the brackets here is 2, positive 2. Now we factorize with brackets, so we create those same brackets by factorizing 2 groups here. And the factorizing will be by x in the first term and by 1. There's a common factor of 1 in both 1x and 2 from the second group. So x is my common factor from my first group, x. Then remaining, I will have x squared divided by x is x for my first term in that first group, and then 2x divided by x, the x's go away and positive 2 remain. And then positive 1 is my factor from my second group, and the remaining I will have x plus 2. When you divide by 1, it remains the same. So in other words, my common set of brackets is x plus 2. Okay, and then I will have as a remainder the x and the positive 1 from each term. And then that is therefore what I put here. So remember, we have to keep it flowing logically, yeah? So I just did the working out here, which you guys should very well have practiced by now. So the common factor that I took out was 2, but the trinomial's factorization is what I put here now. And that is what we've done here. This is the final step. X plus 2 and x plus 1. And there we have it. That's the fully factorized form of the... Okay, now your turn. Quickly try this one. Please mind the fact that also there's a negative last term, so you have to follow the correct steps. Now I'm going to pause myself, do the actual calculations like I've done in the previous one, but not talk at all, and then play the solution going ahead. So you must pause as well. Okay, so here's the solution, but I just want to point out that, yes, I took out a common factor of 3 first. This is the trinomial that remains. Then I do all the steps with the trinomial, but now remember it was a negative last term, so it should be a positive times a negative that gives you the negative. And then what you need to remember is you put the sign with the biggest number of what the answer in the middle is. So we've got a negative answer, so the biggest factor's got to have a negative every time, and this is what I made sure I did. So I wrote the different factors, and then I looked at the 2 factors, and I put the negative with the biggest one out of the 2 factors every time. Okay, and yeah, then I went back and I said, okay, so 3 was my common factor, but for the trinomial, if I factorize that, the x minus 12 and the x plus 1 gives you that answer back. And that's it, people. So the work that you can have a look at is for the 20th worksheet exercise F, question 1 till 8, and that will be displayed on the next page as well. And then on the 21st, Tuesday, it is G, questions 1 till 10 on mixed trinomials now. Okay, so it's all over here. Slide, and there you go. You guys must have a lovely 2 days, and I'll see you on Wednesday for the next lesson. Bye.